They never said my name, just smiled politely and called me the host's wife. I stood beside him at every company dinner, arranging the table, serving the wine, laughing at the right time. They'd thank me for the meal, compliment my dress, and forget I existed before dessert. I was invisible in plain sight, too polite to interrupt, too large to be seen. I used to memorize their faces, their stories, their confident gestures. They looked at me like I was part of the furniture, warm, useful, silent. And I thought that was love, to stay behind so he could shine. But silence corrodes. It eats your voice until you start believing you never had one. The night I overheard one of his colleagues call me just the fat wife who makes great roast. Something inside me cracked quietly. No tears, no screams, just a slow, irreversible fracture. I smiled through the rest of the evening, collecting empty glasses and broken pieces of myself. If you've ever been reduced to a label that wasn't yours, this channel is for you. Subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we tell stories that deserve to be heard. My history with food started long before I knew what hunger meant. In my family, food wasn't just nourishment. It was language, memory, forgiveness. My mother cooked like she was casting spells, like salt and butter could make up for all the things life forgot to give us. When we didn't know how to talk about pain, we ate. When there was something to celebrate, we ate. And when silence fell heavy between us, we ate louder. I remember sitting on the kitchen counter, watching her stir pots of stew, her arms soft and strong, her eyes always tired. "Eat, baby," she'd say, pressing a spoon against my lips. "The world feels less cruel with something warm in your belly." I believed her, because when I chewed, I didn't have to think. When I swallowed, the ache went quiet. At school, I was the funny girl, the friendly one, the one teachers said had a beautiful face. That phrase haunted me, beautiful face. It was a reminder that everything below my neck was an apology. The other girls traded secrets about lip gloss and crushes. I learned to laugh before anyone else could. It became my defense, my disguise. If I made them laugh, they wouldn't notice how my body took up more space than it should. Still, they noticed. They always notice. By high school, food had become both comfort and punishment. I counted calories like confessions, then erased the guilt with cookies at midnight. I'd look at myself in the mirror and whisper promises. Tomorrow I'll eat less. Tomorrow I'll change. Tomorrow I'll finally deserve love. But tomorrow never came. Shame is a loyal companion. It never lets you eat alone. When I met him, he said the words I'd been starving to hear. "You look real, not like those women who never eat." I thought it was love. It was validation disguised as kindness. He liked that I wasn't intimidating. He liked that I laughed easily, that I filled the silence, that I fed him before I fed myself. In the beginning, I mistook that comfort for safety. I cooked for him like my mother had cooked for me. Big meals, rich flavors, proof of devotion. I believed that if I nourished him enough, he'd never leave the table. He was charming, the kind of man who filled every room with confidence. Next to him, I felt both proud and invisible. At dinners, he told stories about deals and promotions, his hands animated, his laughter magnetic. My role was simple: make sure everyone had enough to eat. When the plates were empty and the compliments came, they were always for the food, never for me. "You have a gift," they'd say. "You should open a restaurant." But I didn't want to feed strangers. I wanted someone to see me sitting at the table. After a few years, the dinners became ritual, predictable, exhausting, necessary. I was the perfect hostess, smiling, attentive, invisible. I learned how to anticipate everyone's needs before they asked. If someone spilled wine, I was already there with a towel. If conversation lagged, I'd ask a polite question. My husband thrived in that spotlight, and I disappeared just enough for him to shine brighter. The truth was, I didn't mind at first. It felt familiar. I was raised to serve love in portions, but love shouldn't taste like exhaustion. There was one night that stands out, his company's annual dinner. I wore a deep red dress, one that made me feel bold and feminine. He barely noticed. As the guests arrived, I greeted them at the door, smiling through the panic that comes with pretending you belong. I spent hours in the kitchen, plating dishes while their laughter floated from the dining room like a song from another world. When I finally joined them for dessert, one of the women, polished, thin, diamond rings catching the light, smiled at me and said, "You're amazing. I don't know how you do all this." I smiled back. She turned to her husband and whispered, "Just loud enough." I wish I had her energy, though maybe not her hips. They both laughed. My husband didn't say a word. He poured more wine and changed the subject. I excused myself and stood in the pantry, surrounded by leftovers and the smell of roasted meat. My hands were shaking. I looked down at the chocolate cake I'd made that morning and thought, at least the cake turned out right. Then I took a fork and ate straight from the dish. Each bite was both punishment and relief. Sweetness dulls the sting, but it never heals it. After that night, I began to shrink in new ways. Not physically, though I tried, but emotionally. I spoke less, smiled less, moved carefully through the house like a ghost with chores. The more invisible I became, the more he thrived. Friends told me I was lucky. "He's such a good provider," they said. "He adores you." Maybe he did, in his way. But adoration isn't the same as respect. It's easy to love someone who never demands to be seen. Food remained my constant. When I was happy, I cooked. When I was hurt, I cooked. When I didn't know who I was anymore, I baked until my fingers cramped. Every recipe became a way to measure my worth, a pinch of control in a life that no longer felt mine. My husband liked to joke that our home always smelled like heaven. He never realized it was because I was burning pieces of myself every day just to keep him fed. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, I'd stand by the kitchen window and wonder what it would feel like to eat without guilt, to love my body without apology, to feed myself before feeding everyone else. Those thoughts were fleeting, like steam on glass, here and gone. But they were there, whispering beneath the noise, waiting for the day I'd finally listen. There's a kind of silence that doesn't live in sound but in presence. The kind that lingers between two people who used to know how to reach each other and now can't remember where to touch. My husband and I had fallen into that silence, a quiet so heavy it filled every corner of the house. He still smiled in public, still called me darling when others could hear. But behind closed doors, his voice changed. It wasn't cruel, it was indifferent. And indifference can bruise deeper than cruelty. I'd ask about his day and he'd respond without looking up from his phone. He'd laugh at something on the screen while I sat across from him, invisible. The man who once held my face with both hands now brushed past me like air. I started to notice all the ways I had rearranged myself to make room for him. My hobbies, my voice, my joy. I had turned my own life into background music for his. The dinners continued. They always did. The house became a revolving door of people with ambition and loud laughter. I stayed busy with the cooking and the cleaning because if my hands were occupied, my thoughts couldn't scream. I made everything look effortless, and that was my mistake. No one asks if the calm woman is drowning. They assume she's built for stillness. One night, as I was clearing plates, I heard one of his colleagues in the hallway. "You're lucky," he said, his tone casual, the way men speak when they don't realize they're being cruel. "She's like an unpaid event planner. I can't get my wife to host a single dinner." My husband laughed. "She's good at it." That's all he said. No defense, no acknowledgement, just a satisfied smile. I froze behind the wall, the tray shaking in my hands. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I finished stacking the dishes, washed every plate, wiped every surface. The more I cleaned, the less I felt. When I finally sat down, the kitchen clock ticked so loudly it felt like it was counting down to something I couldn't see. I looked at my reflection in the window, puffy eyes, lipstick faded, a body both too much and not enough, and I realized I was watching a stranger. The next morning, he left early for work, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne and a coffee cup half full. I stood there staring at it, wondering if he'd notice if I stopped making coffee altogether. He wouldn't. That thought hit me harder than anything else. It was strange how grief could sneak into an ordinary Tuesday morning. I felt hollow, like my body had become an empty room echoing with all the words I'd swallowed over the years. Later that week, I tried to bring it up gently. "Do you ever feel like we've changed?" I asked while setting the table. He didn't look up from his laptop. "Everyone changes," he said. "That's just life." He didn't ask what kind of change I meant. I wanted to tell him that I missed being seen, that I was tired of being an accessory to his success. But before I could, he stood, kissed the top of my head like someone petting a loyal dog, and said, "Dinner smells great, sweetheart." And just like that, the conversation ended. I think that's when the last part of me that still hoped began to die. The nights grew longer after that. I'd sit in bed reading articles about women who had left marriages like mine. I envied their bravery, but couldn't imagine it for myself. My whole identity was built around being the wife of. Without that title, who was I? I began sneaking food again, late at night, barefoot in the kitchen, the refrigerator's light the only witness. I wasn't eating because I was hungry. I was eating because it was the only time I felt real. Every bite was defiance, a way of saying, "You can ignore me, but I still exist." The food was cold, heavy, and comforting. It stayed when he didn't. One evening, after another of his company events, I found myself cleaning alone again. The laughter from the night still echoed faintly in the walls. I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My mascara had smudged, my hair was falling out of place, and there was sauce on my sleeve. I looked like a woman who had been busy taking care of everyone except herself. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned on the shower and stepped in fully clothed. The water soaked through the fabric, hot and punishing. It felt like baptism and punishment all at once. I slid down the wall and cried. Not the elegant kind of crying, but the guttural, shaking kind that comes from years of silence. I don't know how long I stayed there, but when the water ran cold, I finally stood up. For the first time, I didn't reach for a towel. I stood in front of the fogged mirror and wiped a small circle clear. "Who are you?" I whispered. My reflection didn't answer, but she looked closer than before, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. The next morning, I opened my laptop and searched how to speak in public. I didn't know why. Maybe I just wanted to imagine a version of myself that still had a voice. I watched videos of women standing behind podiums, their voices steady, their faces lit by conviction. I envied their certainty, their space. There was one woman in particular who spoke about reclaiming yourself after years of invisibility. She said, "If you've been silenced, build a stage." I wrote that down on a piece of paper and taped it to the fridge. Every morning, I read it like a prayer. I wasn't ready to act on it yet. I still felt small, fragile, afraid. But for the first time in years, I had a sentence that belonged only to me. The decision didn't come with fireworks or music. It arrived quietly, on an ordinary afternoon, while I was cleaning wine stains from the carpet. I remember thinking how strange it was to spend another day erasing the evidence of someone else's joy. The house was silent except for the sound of the vacuum, and somewhere between the hum and my heartbeat, something inside me whispered, "No more." It wasn't rebellion, it was awakening. I turned off the vacuum and just stood there, staring at the empty room. The curtains were still drawn from the night before, the scent of his cologne faint in the air. I felt like a ghost haunting the life of a woman I used to be. I walked into the kitchen and saw the paper still taped to the fridge. If you've been silenced, build a stage. I'd been reading it for weeks without really believing it, but that day, it didn't look like a quote. It looked like an instruction. That afternoon, I drove to a bookstore downtown. I hadn't been out alone in months except for groceries, but I told myself I needed a book about reinvention. I wandered through aisles filled with titles that all promised transformation in 10 steps. None of them spoke to me. Just as I was about to leave, a small handwritten sign caught my eye. Community Workshop, Public Speaking for Beginners, Saturdays at 4 p.m. My throat tightened. My first instinct was to laugh. Me? Speak? I couldn't even finish a sentence without apologizing for taking up space. Still, I took a picture of the sign and left. I didn't sign up that day. I stared at that photo for a week before I finally sent the email. The woman who replied was named Claire. Her message was warm and brief. We'd love to have you. Come as you are. The day of the workshop, I almost didn't go. I stood in front of my closet, staring at clothes that all blended together. Dark, shapeless, safe. I picked a simple black blouse and jeans, then changed 3 times. My hands shook as I drove there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I almost turned around twice. But when I arrived, the room wasn't what I expected. It wasn't full of confident people rehearsing TED Talks. It was a group of 8 women, all sitting in a circle, all looking as terrified as I felt. Claire smiled when she saw me. "Hi, I'm glad you came," she said. Her voice was steady, kind. "Here, we don't teach people to perform. We help them remember they already have something to say." That sentence pierced through me. For years, I'd been waiting for permission to speak. Suddenly, someone was telling me I didn't need it. The first time I stood to talk, my voice trembled. My hands sweated. My chest tightened like it used to before I'd walk into a room full of my husband's colleagues. "Hi," I said. "I'm not sure what to say." The group waited. No interruptions, no pity. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was space. "I used to host dinners," I continued, my voice cracking. "People would thank me for the food, but never for being there." My throat burned, but I kept going. I didn't realize until now that I've been feeding everyone but myself. Claire nodded softly, and I swear I saw tears in one woman's eyes. When I finished, no one clapped. They didn't need to. The air felt full, like something sacred had happened. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't turn on the radio, I just listened to the sound of my own breathing. The next day, I signed up for the 6-week program. Every Saturday, I drove to that small community room and learned how to stand taller, breathe deeper, and speak without apology. At first, I only shared stories about cooking, about routines, about safe things. But as the weeks went on, my words began to bleed. I started talking about invisibility, about being erased, about the quiet violence of being loved for convenience. Every time I spoke, a piece of the old silence fell away. My husband noticed the change. "You've been out a lot lately," he said one evening, suspicion hiding behind his casual tone. "Just a class," I replied. "Something for me." He frowned. "For you?" It was as if the concept was foreign to him. "You don't need that kind of thing," he said, laughing it off. "You've got a good life. Why complicate it?" I smiled politely and said nothing, but something in me hardened. The next morning, when he left for work, I looked around the house, the spotless kitchen, the polished glasses, The table always set, and felt no pride, just fatigue. I sat down with my laptop and searched for local storytelling events. There was one in the city 2 months away. Voices unheard, real women, real stories. I read the description 3 times, then signed up before fear could stop me. The weeks that followed were both terrifying and exhilarating. I practiced in front of the mirror, my voice cracking, my reflection unsure. I rehearsed my story, not a speech, but the truth. The first time I said it out loud, I cried halfway through. Not from sadness, but release. For the first time, the words weren't trapped inside me. The night of the event, I wore that same red dress, the one I'd worn years ago for his company dinner, when I was just the fat wife. It didn't fit the same, but I didn't care. I wasn't wearing it for him. I was wearing it for the woman who'd survived that night. As I stood backstage, my heart raced so fast I thought I might faint. Claire was there, holding my hand. "You don't need to be perfect," she whispered. "Just be honest." When they called my name, I stepped into the light, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, not because of how I looked, but because I finally showed up. After that first night on stage, I didn't sleep for almost 2 days. The adrenaline mixed with disbelief, looping through me like a second heartbeat. I kept replaying the moment I looked into the audience and saw people crying, nodding, holding their chests like they recognized the pain I was naming. No one had ever looked at me that way before, not as decoration, not as the woman behind someone, but as a voice. When the applause came, it wasn't loud or chaotic. It was steady, human, real. That sound became my new addiction. Not the clapping itself, but what it meant. I existed. People saw me. They heard me. And that changed everything. The following weeks, my inbox filled with messages from strangers who'd been in the audience. Women who'd written things like, "I've been the silent one too," or, "I thought I was the only one who felt invisible." Each message felt like a piece of thread, connecting me to a network I never knew existed. Women who'd spent their lives behind curtains, behind kitchens, behind someone else's name. I started replying to each one, late at night, sitting in that same kitchen that used to feel like a cage. But now it felt like a command center. I didn't have a plan, I just knew I couldn't go back. I decided to record my story, just once, and post it online. I sat in front of my laptop, trembling, my hair pulled back, no makeup, my kitchen behind me. I didn't edit it, I didn't rehearse. I spoke for 10 minutes straight, about love that silences, about the kind of loneliness that wears perfume and smiles for guests. I ended by saying, if you've ever felt like a background character in your own life, maybe it's time to take the stage. I hit upload before I could change my mind. By morning, it had thousands of views. Comments poured in, some kind, some cruel, but the ones that mattered were from people who said, "Thank you. You said what I couldn't." For the first time, my words traveled farther than my dinners ever did. The more I spoke, the more I understood. My story wasn't unique, it was universal. I began writing more, sharing small reflections online, tiny pieces of truth. You can't heal in the same room where you disappeared. Silence is not peace. Visibility is not vanity. It's survival. People began quoting me, tagging me, inviting me to virtual events. At first, I declined every invitation. I still didn't see myself as someone who belonged on a stage. But one day, I got an email from a local women's nonprofit asking me to speak at their annual luncheon. I almost said no. Then I remembered all those years I'd spent serving food to people who wouldn't remember my name. This time, they wanted me at the microphone. "I'll do it," I wrote back, my hands shaking. The event was small, maybe 50 people in a hotel conference room. but to me, it felt like stepping into another life. I wore a dark blue dress that hugged me in the right places and made me feel strong. When I took the stage, I could smell coffee, pastries, nerves. My voice trembled at first, but then I saw a woman in the front row wipe her eyes, and something inside me steadied. I told them my story, but I also told them theirs, about the women who cook and organize and smile while their names dissolve in the background noise of men talking over them. When I finished, the room stood. I didn't expect it. I didn't even know what to do. I just stood there crying, laughing, breathing. That applause wasn't for performance, it was for truth. After the event, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 25, thin, polished, everything I used to envy. "You made me call my mom," she said. "I think she's been invisible for a long time." That's when I realized this wasn't about revenge or redemption. It was about legacy. The very thing that once made me feel small, my voice, my body, my softness, was becoming my tool for impact. I began hosting small gatherings at a local cafe every other week, calling them the Quiet Women's Circle. At first, there were only 3 of us. We sat around mismatched chairs, drinking tea, sharing stories we'd never dared to tell before. By the 4th meeting, there were 12, then 20. The cafe owner gave us the back room for free, saying, "I like what you're doing here." What we were doing wasn't revolutionary in the traditional sense. We weren't marching or shouting. We were remembering ourselves out loud. And somehow that was enough to change things. My husband, of course, didn't understand. "You've been different lately," he said one night as I was preparing for another meeting. "All this women's stuff, what's it even for?" His voice carried that same tone of casual dismissal I'd heard for years. "For me," I said simply. He looked at me like I'd spoken a language he didn't understand. Maybe I had. I packed my bag, kissed him on the cheek, and left before he could answer. That was the last dinner I ever cooked for his guests. Within a year, the small cafe meetings grew into something larger. A local magazine wrote an article about the woman who turned silence into a movement. Invitations started arriving from schools, organizations, even corporations. They wanted me to speak about empowerment, resilience, and voice. It was ironic. I used to feed these people dinner, and now they were paying to listen to me talk. The first time I got a check with my name on it, I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't the amount that mattered. It was the name. My name. Mine. One evening, after a long day of workshops, I came home to an empty kitchen. The air smelled faintly of old wine and lemon cleaner. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at the table, and smiled. The same woman who once felt invisible now made a living helping others be seen. I looked at my reflection in the window, the same one that used to hold a stranger, and saw something unshakable. Not perfection, not confidence, presence. And presence, I learned, is louder than applause. It started with emails, then messages, then entire letters. They came from every corner of the country. Women, men, teenagers. People who had never met me but somehow recognized themselves in my story. Some said they had lost themselves in marriage. Others wrote about shrinking at work, about being talked over in rooms they had built. Every story felt like an echo of my own. I used to think my silence was mine alone, but now I knew it was a chorus. Thousands of quiet voices waiting for permission to rise. I began keeping every message in a folder called The Echo. On nights when doubt returned, I'd open it and read them one by one, like prayers in reverse, not words to God, but to the parts of ourselves we had buried. One woman wrote, "I stopped cooking for my husband last week. It felt terrifying and holy." Another said, "I spoke at my office meeting today for the first time in years. They listened." Every sentence was a tremor in the ground beneath the old life I had left behind. The quiet women's circle grew faster than I could keep up with. We moved from the cafe to a rented hall. We started adding chairs, microphones, notebooks. The first time I heard someone say, "This place saved me," I felt both proud and terrified. I never wanted to be anyone's savior. I just wanted to be proof that healing was possible. But the truth is, when you begin to rise, people notice, and they start believing they can rise too. Soon I wasn't leading the meetings anymore. I was witnessing them. Women shared stories about divorce, grief, bodies, shame, and survival. Some cried, others laughed through tears. Each one left lighter. Each one left seen. The room began to hum with something sacred, the sound of women remembering their voices. I was invited to speak at a conference in Chicago, my biggest event yet. Hundreds of people, a stage, lights, cameras. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years ago, I would have been in the kitchen preparing the meal for an event like that. Now, I was the one being introduced. As I walked on stage, I felt the old fear press against my ribs, the fear of taking up space, of being too much. But then I looked out at the faces watching me, expectant and tender, and the fear melted. I spoke about invisibility, about identity, about the quiet hunger to be known. I didn't use notes. I didn't need them. Every word came from somewhere older and truer than memory. When I finished, the applause didn't sound like noise. It sounded like recognition. After the talk, a man approached me. He looked nervous, holding a program against his chest. "My wife made me come," he said with a crooked smile. "She said I needed to listen." His eyes were wet when he continued. "She's in your circle now. I didn't realize how much she'd been carrying." I nodded, unsure what to say. He added, "Thank you for giving her back to herself." His voice cracked on the last word. That night, I sat in my hotel room, staring at the city lights, realizing that what had begun as a whisper in my kitchen had become a ripple moving through lives I would never touch directly. The following months blurred into motion: workshops, panels, interviews, podcasts. My voice traveled farther than I ever imagined. I received messages from women in other countries, writing in broken English or through translation apps, saying things like, "You are my mirror." One video of my talk went viral, and suddenly there were news stories with headlines like, "Former housewife turns her pain into power." I hated that phrasing. Pain wasn't power. Power was what came after pain, the decision to live differently. Still, I couldn't deny what was happening. People began calling me an inspiration, a speaker, a leader. Titles I had never asked for, but ones I carried with gratitude. Yet even in all the noise, I tried to stay anchored to where it started, that small quote on my refrigerator. "If you've been silenced, build a stage." I still had that piece of paper. It had become wrinkled and faded, but I kept it framed on my desk. A reminder that nothing I built came from ambition. It came from absence. Not everything was easy. The more visible I became, the more some people resisted it. My husband and I eventually separated. There wasn't a fight, just a long sigh that lasted months. When I told him I was moving out, he didn't argue. He just said, "You've changed." And for the first time, I smiled and said, "I was supposed to." Leaving that house felt like leaving a version of myself buried in the walls. I didn't take much: a few clothes, my notebooks, my framed quote. The kitchen, once my prison, now belonged to the past. The first night alone in my new apartment, I cooked myself dinner for the first time in years. Just one plate, one glass, one chair. I lit a candle and sat down, not to host or serve, but to eat, slowly, deliberately. I took a bite and let the flavors settle, realizing I hadn't really tasted food in over a decade. Tears came, not from sadness, but gratitude. I whispered, "Welcome back." It wasn't dramatic. It was human. In the weeks that followed, I watched others from the circle begin to lead their own gatherings in other cities: Phoenix, Dallas, Seattle. They sent me photos of small rooms filled with laughter, shared stories, and quiet strength. I saw women who once shook when they spoke now standing tall, teaching others to do the same. That's when I understood something profound. My voice was never meant to be the loudest, just the first. I was an echo too. And echoes, when multiplied, sound a lot like revolution. For years, I imagined the scene where I'd finally confront him. I'd walk into one of his elegant dinners, dressed in confidence instead of shame, and he'd see me the way I'd always wanted to be seen. Not as the silent wife, but as the woman who had outgrown his world. In my head, he'd stumble over his words, apologize, maybe even beg. I used to rehearse that fantasy while washing dishes, each plate a stage, each rinse a line I never got to say. But life doesn't care about the scenes you rehearse. The moment came, but not the way I expected. It was 2 years after our separation when I received an invitation from one of his colleagues, a woman who had attended one of my talks. She wanted me to speak at their company's annual leadership retreat. I almost laughed when I read the email. It was the same company whose dinners I had once cooked for, the same people who used to forget my name. The irony felt almost divine. My first instinct was to say no, but something in me whispered, "Go." Not for revenge, not for validation, for closure. I accepted. The event took place in a high-end hotel ballroom, the kind I used to decorate with candles and flowers. This time, I was the one listed on the program, my name in bold letters under the words, "Keynote Speaker." When I arrived, I could smell the same brand of wine he used to buy, hear the same polite laughter I'd memorized years ago. The ghosts of those nights brushed against me as I walked through the hall. My palms were damp, but my heart was steady. I stood behind the curtain, listening to the moderator introduce me, and for a moment, I thought I might see him in the crowd. But when I walked on stage, I didn't search for his face. I looked at the sea of strangers instead, people who didn't know the woman who used to pour their drinks, people who only knew the voice standing before them now. I spoke for 40 minutes straight, telling my story with precision and grace, but without bitterness. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. The truth had already done the work. When the applause came, it wasn't triumph that filled me. It was peace. After the talk, the organizer led me to a private reception. That's when I saw him. Older, thinner, grayer. His suit still immaculate, his posture still confident, but his eyes, they flickered with something I couldn't name. He looked surprised, maybe even proud, but mostly small. "You were incredible," he said, approaching me cautiously. "Everyone's talking about you." His voice was the same, but it no longer carried weight. "Thank you," I replied simply. I didn't add more. There was a pause, thick with all the words we'd never said. I expected a speech, an apology, something cinematic. Instead, he nodded, smiled faintly, and walked away. That was it. The scene I'd imagined for years had lasted less than 30 seconds. And in that quiet, I understood. I didn't need his remorse to be free. My life had already outgrown his apology. That night, back in my hotel room, I stood by the window watching the city lights blur in the rain. I thought I'd feel victorious, but what I felt instead was tenderness. Not for him, but for the woman I had been. The one who stayed silent for too long, who measured her worth in applause that never came. She didn't need to be punished. She needed to be thanked, because without her patience, her longing, her quiet endurance, I would never have learned to build a life that didn't depend on being chosen. I whispered into the glass, "You can rest now." In the following weeks, I kept waiting for something dramatic to happen. for him to call, to apologize, to acknowledge the transformation he'd witnessed. But the call never came, and strangely, I stopped waiting for it. Healing, I realized, isn't a performance. It doesn't need an audience or a villain's confession. It's the soft return to yourself after the storm. I no longer needed him to validate the woman I had become. The proof was in my own voice, steady, unshaken, alive. A few months later, I was invited to a university to give a lecture about self-worth and storytelling. The auditorium was packed with young women, their notebooks open, eyes wide with that mix of hope and uncertainty I recognized so well. One of them asked, "What would you say to the people who hurt you?" I smiled and said, "Nothing." They weren't the ones who needed to hear me. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that holds truth instead of pain. I looked at all those faces and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly broke me. That's when I realized the confrontation I had imagined wasn't meant for him. It was meant for me, for every time I'd silenced my own voice. The real closure was standing in that room, surrounded by women who were learning to speak before life convinced them not to. Sometimes late at night, I still think about him, not with anger, but with a strange sort of compassion. I wonder if he ever tells people that his ex-wife is the speaker who's booked months in advance. I hope he does. Not because I need the recognition, but because maybe, just maybe, hearing my name aloud will remind him that I was always more than a hostess. I was a woman waiting to be heard, and now I no longer need anyone's permission to be loud. Sometimes I still catch myself walking through hotel kitchens before a speech, tracing the smell of roasted garlic and melted butter like it's a memory I left behind. The clang of plates, the hiss of pans. They used to be the soundtrack of my life. Now they sound like an echo from another world. I no longer flinch when I hear them. I smile. Those sounds built me. They carried me through silence, through shame, through years of being seen only in glimpses. My body carried me too. The same body that people mocked, that I tried to shrink, that I once treated like a mistake. It was never the problem. It was the map. Every curve, every scar, every stretch of skin was proof that I had survived the weight of invisibility. This body was never too much. It was exactly enough. I used to believe I needed to be smaller to be loved. I spent decades chasing the version of myself that would finally fit into the frame of someone else's comfort. But the truth is, I was never meant to fit. I was meant to fill the room. My body learned how to dance with pain and still stay upright. It absorbed every insult, every dismissal, every moment I bit my tongue to keep the peace. It held all of that and still carried me forward. That's not weakness. That's grace disguised as flesh. These days, I travel a lot. Airports, hotels, stages. I see women everywhere. At coffee shops, on trains, in conference halls, their eyes tired but glowing with that quiet knowing. Some recognize me. They approach shyly, like they're interrupting something sacred. "You don't know me," they say, "but your story changed mine." I never know how to respond, so I just hold their hands and tell them the truth. We saved each other. Because that's what it feels like. Each voice that rises from silence creates room for another. It's not about fame or applause or followers. It's about the collective heartbeat of women who finally refuse to disappear. One morning, not long ago, I woke up early in a hotel room overlooking the city. The sun was soft, the kind that forgives instead of burns. I stood in front of the mirror, the same kind of mirror I used to fear, and just looked at myself. Not to judge, not to fix, just to witness. My reflection met my gaze with a tenderness that nearly broke me. For years, I avoided mirrors because they showed me what I didn't want to see. Now, they show me everything I fought to become. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't a prayer. It was a homecoming. I've learned that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering the person you were before the world told you who to be. The woman who laughed too loudly. The one who danced in the kitchen. The one who believed that love could taste like fresh bread and Sunday mornings. She never left. She just got buried under other people's expectations. Every time I tell my story, she breathes again. Every time another woman stands up to tell hers, the world shifts slightly toward truth. My husband, my ex-husband, once told me that my greatest talent was making people comfortable. He meant it as a compliment. I know better now. Comfort is easy. Change is not. I wasn't born to make people comfortable. I was born to make them listen. And sometimes the most radical act a woman can commit is to stop apologizing for being heard. My body may not move with the lightness it once did, but it carries purpose now. It walks into rooms I once wasn't allowed to enter, stands on stages built for other voices, and fills the air with something heavier than beauty: truth. Last month, after one of my talks, a young girl waited until everyone else had left before approaching me. She was maybe 16, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "I hate my body," she said softly, her eyes downcast. "I hate how it makes people look at me." I took her hand and said, "Then don't live for their eyes. Live for your heartbeat." She looked at me like I had just handed her something she didn't know she'd lost. Maybe I did. Maybe that's all I ever wanted, to give others what I once needed most: permission to exist without apology. Tonight I'm packing for another trip, another city, another audience. My suitcase holds fewer clothes and more courage than ever before. I slip my red dress inside, the same one I wore the night I realized I was invisible, the same one I wore the night I claimed my voice. It no longer fits perfectly, but that feels right. I've outgrown it in all the best ways. Before I close the suitcase, I run my hand across the fabric and smile. That dress once carried my silence. Now it carries my story. When people ask me how I found my voice, I tell them the truth. I didn't find it. It was never lost. It was just waiting for me to stop whispering. My voice was in my laughter, my hunger, my tears, my body. Especially my body. The one they called too much. The one they told to shrink. The one that stood between me and the world until I was ready to face it. The one that saved me, again and again, until I could finally save myself. If this story spoke to you, subscribe and leave a like. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Your story matters too.